Over the past few weeks, the strikes that the United States and Israel have taken against Iran have been absolutely dominating our headlines and coverage in the news, and rightfully so. Most of this coverage focuses on geopolitics and military operations. A lot of the coverage will also focus on the price of oil and the energy shocks and the stock market shocks that have been happening. What isn't being covered nearly enough is a system that actually impacts each and every one of ours financial future. That system is called the Petrodollar system. And if that system weakens because of what is going on right now, two things are going to happen. One, our ability as a country to really leverage sanctions dramatically decreases. And two, everything will become more expensive and less predictable financially for every American. And before we dive into how that is, let's just understand what the petrodollar system is, how it started, and why it matters in this current conflict. You see, after World War II, the United States led the effort to create an international system to stabilize international trade, to be able to build economies around the world. And we did this by pegging the United States dollar to gold. A dollar was as good as gold. And we pegged a bunch of other countries' currencies to the US dollar. Well, in the 1970s, President Nixon took the United States off the gold standard. And in order to stabilize the actual value of our currency, we started making international deals. One of those deals we made with Saudi Arabia to only sell their oil in US dollars, regardless of who they were selling it to. This is important because a lot of the other oil producing countries then followed suit. And that created the petrodollar system. These oil producing countries sell their oil in US dollars. Those transactions therefore happen through US financial institutions. And those countries who are selling oil rack up a bunch of US dollars. And then they use those US dollars to buy things like US treasuries, or, which is, by the way, our debt, or they'll invest in our stock market, buying our companies, they buy our real estate. They keep the demand for the US dollar high, which keeps the value of the US dollar high. And because it's happening through US financial institutions, we get to control the rules around these transactions throughout the entire world. And why does this conflict with Iran start to threaten that? Well, because we've been ratcheting up sanctions against Iran, Iran has been looking for other ways to sell oil outside the US dollar, and they have been selling oil to China completely outside the US dollar. Just last year alone, there was about $50 billion worth of oil sold to China in their own currency, already weakening the petrodollar system. Russia would love to do the same thing because we've had sanctions against them. And all these Gulf states that are receiving retaliatory strikes against Iran and aren't able to sell their oil because the Straits of Hormuz are shut down are all going to start looking sooner or later for some other system that isn't US based. That's how this ongoing conflict really threatens to weaken this entire system, because it's all based on the stability that the system provides to the region. And if that stability isn't happening, then there's really no reason for them to keep participating in the system, which has been benefiting us for decades. And let's dive into the actual implications if the system was to weaken even more than it already has. Well, like I already said, because these financial transactions are happening in US dollars, they go through US institutions. When these transactions are going through US institutions, that means our US government can set rules on it. If a country is doing something we really don't like, we bar them from being able to do transactions in our institutions. That is one form of sanctions. If you want me to dive into sanctions and how they're leveraged and different types of sanctions, let me know in a comment below and I'll make a different video on it. But our ability to actually launch crippling sanctions on countries like Iran, countries like Russia, is because all of these transactions are happening in US dollars. If they start happening in not US dollars, our ability to launch sanctions that actually has any sort of impact starts to become reduced, which means that things like using military power starts to become more and more and more the norm. That is dangerous for all of us. The second thing it does is because this entire system is keeping our ability to have cheap debt in terms of our national debt. Our ability to have high demand for the US dollar is in part because the system exists in the first place. If this system starts to break down, then just understand that 90% of whatever is made in US consumer goods is made with components from elsewhere in the world. And if our dollar value goes down, everything we make here, or at least 90% of it, becomes more expensive to make, which means it is more expensive for you and I to buy at a time where affordability is already at crisis levels. This is why this ongoing conflict with Iran is not just geopolitics. It's not just military. There is real consequences for each and every one of us, especially if the world is looking at the instability that's being created and saying, we don't want a part of that anymore. And we want to find other systems. We want to find other currencies to operate in. And because of the crippling sanctions that we've had in place, some of those alternatives are already built and are in a position to be scaled up. And so the question is whether we keep trying to defend this 1970s system and leveraging sort of the 2020s military approach to foreign policy that we've seen over and over again, or whether we want to actually use our force in the world to build a more stable future, which allows our dollar to be stronger for everyone. That's fundamentally the choice we have, and that's something that I think isn't being talked about enough. And now you know probably more than 90% of other Americans know. So my ask for everyone watching this video is please share it. And please share the ideas more importantly than sharing the video. Ask each other, regardless of what you think about our current president and the actions being taken, is it worth the risk of our entire economy becoming even more expensive for everyone? That's a fundamental question we should be asking right now. And I hope you're asking it too. Thank you. If you haven't yet, please click like on this video, drop a comment below, and click that subscribe button. It'll help the YouTube algorithm make sure that these videos are getting into your feed. Thank you.